I never believed in ghosts. That is, until I spent a night locked inside the old school building. It was a dare, of course. My friends and I had heard the rumors, stories passed down from older students, whispered in hushed voices during lunch. They said the school was haunted, that late at night, you could hear footsteps echoing down the empty halls, lockers slamming shut on their own, and whispers floating through the air when no one was around. None of us really believed it. We were just kids looking for a thrill. So, when Jake suggested we sneak in after dark and spend the night, I agreed without hesitation. Getting in was easier than expected. A loose window in the back of the building had been broken for years, never fixed. We slipped inside, our flashlights casting long shadows on the peeling walls. The school felt different at night, colder, emptier, almost as if it was holding its breath. At first, it was fun. We explored the abandoned classrooms, rummaged through old desks, and dared each other to walk down the dark hallways alone. But the mood shifted when we reached the second floor. The air grew thick, heavy with something I couldn't explain. The silence was absolute, too absolute. Then, the first sound came. A locker door slammed shut somewhere down the hall. We all froze. Probably the wind, Jake whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. There was no wind. No open windows. Just us and the dark. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. Who's there? I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Just the sound of shoes scuffing against the tile, moving toward us. My heart pounded as I swung my flashlight in the direction of the noise. The beam of light cut through the dark, revealing nothing but an empty hallway. Then, the whispers started. They weren't coming from one direction but from all around us, overlapping voices murmuring in a language I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted as the temperature dropped even further. I saw my breath fog up in the air. Jake bolted first, and the rest of us weren't far behind. We sprinted toward the exit, our footsteps slamming against the floor. But when we reached the staircase, something was wrong. The doorway we had come through, the only way down, was gone. In its place was a solid brick wall. This isn't possible, I gasped, my hands pressing against the cold surface. Panic surged through me. The whispers grew louder. Closer. And then, the lights flickered on. The hallway was no longer empty. Figures stood in front of every locker, their faces obscured by the shadows. They weren't moving. Just standing. Watching. Jake screamed. Someone grabbed my arm. I turned to run, but the floor beneath us seemed to stretch endlessly. No matter how fast we moved, the figures remained just as close, their silent presence suffocating. Then, the worst part happened. A voice, low, hollow, and echoing, spoke from the darkness. You shouldn't have come. And everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the school lawn, the sun rising in the distance. My friends were there too, all of us dazed, confused. The school doors were locked, as if no one had ever been inside. We never spoke about that night again. None of us could explain what happened, and none of us ever set foot in that building after dark. But sometimes, when I pass by the school, I swear I still hear the whispers, calling my name. Years passed, but the nightmares never left me. Shadows crept at the edges of my vision. I would wake up gasping in the dead of night, sweat-drenched, feeling unseen eyes upon me. It didn't matter how much I tried to forget. That place had marked me. One evening, after years of avoidance, I found myself standing in front of the school once again. It was abandoned now, boarded up, forgotten by everyone except me. The whispers had never stopped. They followed me. They invaded my sleep, slithered into my thoughts. And tonight, something compelled me to return. I shouldn't have gone in. But the pull was unbearable. The same loose window remained, as if waiting for me. I hesitated, then climbed through, landing in a layer of dust and decay. The air was thick with age and something else, something watching. I turned on my flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the empty corridors. The walls seemed to breathe, the silence pressing in on me. Then, from the second floor, a sound. Footsteps. Not slow like before, but running. Hurried. Desperate. A chill ran down my spine as I took a step forward, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. The footsteps weren't alone this time. A faint sobbing followed, a choked, painful sound that echoed through the building. My pulse quickened. "Hello?" I whispered. The crying stopped. The silence stretched, unbearably thick. Then, a hand shot out of the darkness, grabbing my wrist. I screamed, yanking myself free and stumbling backward. My flashlight clattered to the floor, its beam spinning wildly. In that flickering light, I saw it, her. A girl, standing in the hallway, her hair matted, her face hidden behind long, damp strands. Her body twitched as if glitching, her limbs unnatural. But her eyes. Empty. Hollow. Bleeding darkness. And then she whispered, her voice burrowing into my mind. "You came back." The hallway behind her exploded with movement. Shadows surged forward, figures with no faces, their hands reaching. I turned to run, but my feet wouldn't move. A cold breath whispered against my ear. "Stay with us." Everything went black. I awoke in my bed, gasping for air, my body trembling. But something was wrong. My feet were covered in dust. My hands were streaked with dirt. And on my wrist, where something had grabbed me, was a deep, black handprint, burned into my skin. The school never let me go. And I know, one day soon, it will take me back. The nightmares never stopped. The whispers followed me everywhere, at work, in my car, even when I was surrounded by people. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks, but the handprint on my wrist never faded. It remained, burned into my skin like a brand, a reminder that the school had never let me go. And then, the children started appearing. It began subtly. A glimpse of a figure in the corner of my eye, small hands pressed against windows, distant laughter that sent chills down my spine. Then, they got closer. A child standing outside my apartment, staring up at my window. A giggle from under my bed when I was home alone. Footsteps in my hallway when no one else was there. I was losing my mind. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Then the news broke. The old school was set for demolition. A crew was scheduled to tear it down within the week. But as soon as they entered, something went wrong. Reports surfaced of workers running out screaming, refusing to go back inside. They spoke of voices, of doors slamming shut on their own, of unseen hands grabbing at them. One man, his face pale with fear, claimed to have seen children in the hallways. Children with hollow eyes, standing silently in the dark. I knew then. The school wasn't just haunted. It was waiting. I had to go back. That night, I stood in front of the school once again. The fence had been torn down, construction lights casting eerie shadows against the crumbling walls. Police were stationed nearby, ensuring no one trespassed before demolition. But I knew no police force in the world could stop what was inside that building. I didn't have a plan. I only had the overwhelming certainty that I needed to end this. To find whatever it was that had latched onto me and sever the connection before it was too late. I slipped past the officers, keeping to the shadows. The same window, the one I had climbed 3 years ago, was still loose. As if the school had never sealed itself off from me. The air was thick, suffocating. My flashlight flickered as I moved through the halls, dust swirling in the beam. The silence was unbearable. I made my way to the second floor, my breath coming in short gasps. Then, I heard it. A thud. Followed by another. Then the unmistakable sound of something heavy crashing to the ground. A scream, high-pitched, terrified, echoed through the hallway. I ran. Turning the corner, I saw them. Children. Dozens of them. Their small figures huddled together in the dim light. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror. And then I saw what they were looking at. A massive bookcase had fallen, crushing some of the children beneath it. Their tiny arms reached out, their mouths open in silent screams. But what made my blood run cold wasn't their agony. It was that they weren't alive. Their skin was gray, their lips cracked, their eyes hollow pits of darkness. The ones still standing turned toward me in unison. Their heads tilted at unnatural angles. And then, as one, they whispered. "You let us die." A deafening slam came from behind me. I turned just in time to see a door fly open, revealing a stairwell leading down into darkness. A force yanked me forward, dragging me down the stairs. I tumbled, my flashlight shattering against the stone steps. The whispers surrounded me, growing into a cacophony of voices, wailing, sobbing, screaming. I hit the ground hard, pain exploding in my ribs. Gasping, I tried to stand, but the moment I did, I felt cold hands grab my arms. The children were there, their hollow eyes locked onto me. "Stay with us." I screamed. I wrenched myself free, stumbling backward. My hands landed on something smooth, something metal. A badge. A security officer's badge. And then I saw them. The bodies. 3 officers lay sprawled on the floor, their eyes wide open, their mouths frozen in silent horror. Blood pooled beneath them, their radios crackling with static. A voice came through the speaker. A frantic officer shouting for backup. "Units, we have a situation, multiple officers down inside the building. We need assistance." The radio cut out. The lights flickered. And then, the footsteps started again. Not just one pair. Hundreds. They came from all directions, the sound of small feet slapping against the cold tile. I turned wildly, searching for an escape, but the shadows moved faster. And then, the girl appeared again. The one I had seen that night. Her matted hair covered most of her face, but her bleeding eyes bore into mine. "You should have stayed away." The walls trembled. The floor beneath me cracked. A sound like distant thunder rumbled through the building. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran. The doors had been locked, but as I reached the front entrance, they burst open on their own. I threw myself outside, landing on the cold grass. Police officers rushed toward me, their guns drawn, their radios blaring. But the moment I turned back, the building was silent again. The children were gone. The shadows had retreated. And the girl, she stood by the doorway, watching. As the police grabbed me, shaking me, demanding answers, I realized the truth. The school didn't want to be destroyed. It wanted to be fed. And it wasn't finished with me yet. They let me go that night. The police, the paramedics, they checked me over, asked questions I couldn't answer. I told them I had blacked out, that I didn't remember how I got inside. They didn't believe me, but they couldn't prove anything either. The next morning, the news reported that the demolition was delayed indefinitely. The construction company refused to step foot inside the school again. And the officers who had entered with me? Dead. Their bodies were found in the same place I had seen them, their faces frozen in horror. The cause of death was inconclusive. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Just, dead. I tried to move on. I tried to pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. But the whispers never left. They grew louder. At first, they only came at night. The soft murmur of voices slipping through my dreams. Then they came during the day. In my car. At work. I saw shadows moving just out of sight, reflections that weren't mine in the mirror. And then, the girl came back. She stood outside my apartment window one evening, staring up at me from the street below. Rain soaked her tattered dress, but she didn't move. She just stood there, watching. I closed my curtains. I turned on every light. But when I looked again, she was inside. Standing at the end of my hallway. The lights flickered. The air turned ice cold. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Then, in the silence, her whisper slithered through the dark. "It's time." I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember getting in my car. But I drove. As fast and as far as I could. Yet somehow, I knew exactly where I was going. The school. It was waiting for me. The front doors stood wide open as if expecting my return. The inside was worse than I remembered. The air was thick, pressing against my skin like a living thing. Shadows curled along the edges of my vision, shifting when I wasn't looking. I stepped inside. The doors slammed shut behind me. The whispers returned, no longer distant. They were right next to my ear, overlapping voices, some pleading, some laughing, some weeping. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my body moving like it was being guided. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My feet stopped in front of a door I didn't recognize. Room 206. I pushed it open. Inside, the classroom was untouched by time. Desks stood in perfect rows. The chalkboard was clean. But something was wrong. The smell. The thick, putrid scent of rot. Then, I saw them. The children. Huddled in the corner, their small bodies trembling. Their eyes were hollow voids, mouths open in silent cries. And then, one by one, they turned to look at me. "You left us," they whispered. I staggered back, my pulse hammering. I didn't. But then I remembered. The fire. Flashes of a forgotten memory crashed into me. The smoke, the screams, the heat. I had been here before. Years ago. I was a child. And I had escaped. While the others had burned. The school had been my prison once before. The fire had started on this floor. And I had run. I had left them behind. Now, they wanted me to remember. Now, they wanted me to stay. The girl appeared in front of me, inches away. Her hair clung to her wet, rotting skin. "You were supposed to burn with us." I tried to run, but the shadows swallowed me whole. The walls trembled. The windows shattered. The ceiling above cracked open, revealing only endless darkness. Then the children reached for me. Their hands gripped my arms, my legs, pulling me down. The floor gave way beneath me, and I was falling, tumbling into the black void below. Their screams filled my head, their whispers crawling into my bones. The last thing I saw before everything turned to nothing. The girl. Smiling. And then, I burned. The aftermath. They found my body in the morning. The school was gone. Reduced to ashes. No one could explain how the fire started. The demolition crew never touched the building. The police never entered. Yet by dawn, nothing remained but smoldering ruins. They found me in the center of it all. Charred beyond recognition. No one understood how I had gotten inside. How I had burned in a fire that had no source. But I knew. I had never left. And now, I never would. The school had finally taken me back. And it was hungry for more.